Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is the Commuter Systems Program Strategic Plan Requirements and Guidance webinar. Hopefully you all are on the proper or the correct webinar. We have some people trickling in, so I'll kind of just give some overview of what we'll be talking about today while some folks trickle in, and then we'll get right into the meat of the webinar. So we'll go through the requirements and provide some guidance on what is required and needed in a CAP. We'll be abbreviating this Commuter Systems Program to CAP. So I save a few words and things go a little shorter. But you know, we'll start off with that. There'll be plenty of opportunities to ask questions. I think you've all been on these before, so you know how to use the question box that in the GoToWebinar to ask some questions. You can also raise your hand if you want to verbally ask your question. We'll unmute you to do that. But this is really to get for you folks to get your questions answered, and so you know how to move forward with these plans. I'll give you kind of an overview. We will have this. This will be recorded. And slides, the presentation slides will be available. And then after this webinar, we will also be sending out the final version of the strategic plan requirements and guidance document that we have been kind of working on for a while. So with that, I think we're pretty much, maxed out. I think the folks that have registered pretty much are all here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So good afternoon again. My name is Chris Arabia. I'm the manager of statewide commuter programs for DRPT, and this is the Commuter Systems Program Strategic Plan Requirements and Guidance webinar. So next slide. So let me just start off with a little brief on the background. We actually started this process right before the COVID pandemic hit. I believe it was January of 2020. We sent out a document that had our requirements and guidance for everyone to comment on, provide their feedback on. We made some changes based on that, and then we just put it on hold. Right? Really wasn't worth doing any data collection and research or any studying during the height of or the first couple of years of the pandemic. 2020 and 2021 were just not good times to be doing any type of studies like this. So we put it on hold. We came back to it a little while ago. We had another draft for everyone to comment on. We got some more comments on that. It went out on the town hall, which is this Commonwealth public site for all of our requirements types documents for the entire Commonwealth. All agencies to put out there to get public comment and feedback. So we did hear from a few more of you, and we want to thank everyone who's been providing comments on this. And so we've made some more changes based on the feedback we received, and I'll discuss them as we go on with this webinar. But those will be reflected in the final version of the document, which, like I said, after the webinar, if not this afternoon, tomorrow, or Monday at the latest, we'll send it out to everyone who's on this webinar. So everyone has their own copy of it. Okay, next. All right, so who's required to do the document? Let's just, to prepare a plan. So let's just get that right up front. So any organization, any agency that either currently receives funding from DRPT or will receive funding through DRPT in the future, or plans on applying for funds or getting some funds to do any type of commuter assistance program. And what I mean by commuter assistance program is anything that you're doing to help the public, get from point A to point B in some mode other than SOV, single occupant vehicle. Just trying to give them options on for their modes, but also promoting things like, hey, meet at a park and ride lot. Here's a guaranteed ride home program that will help you ease your mind. Here's some what their transit options are, and that And that also covers if you just have an employer outreach program or some employer services program where you only deal with employers. So it really runs the gamut of anything. The main point is that if you're receiving funding through DRPT, either from a direct DRPT grant that you get, or funds that go through DRPT, but they're allocated by the Metropolitan Planning Organization or Transportation Planning Organization in your region. If those funds get administered by DRPT to you, then we want to see a plan also. Okay, next. All right, so why are we doing this? Why are we having you go through this plan? Okay, next. Good question. So, just to start off, the plan is not just for DRPT. It's not something, oh, we'll just do this because DRPT requires it. We'll get it done. We'll turn it in, and okay, we'll move on from there. The idea is that this plan is actually your blueprint of what you're doing to run your program. So it is something for you that you use, and so it's not just for DRPT, but it is something that if you don't have a plan, and we'll get to due dates later on in the webinar. If you don't have a plan and you come in for a grant for us, where you're doing some other things for some other funding, and it's not, you haven't planned it out, you haven't put in any type of plan, we're going to wonder, like, why are you doing that? So this kind of helps us also to understand, what you want to do, why you want to do it, so that when you do apply, we can reference back to it. So it is important to DRPT, but we want to make sure that you feel it's important to you, because like I said, it is your plan, it's your blueprint to operate your program. And so, this slide, I'm not going to read them all, has some extra other things of why it's important, why we're doing this process. There are more in the guidance document and requirements document, but it's really to serve that planning document. So many of you on this call represent agencies that have done other transportation plans, maybe transit development plans, or are working on a transit strategic plan. So you understand, the need for planning, right? Good planning leads to a good program, right? And so a lot of folks, I think, for these programs haven't really taken a look at their program in years. Some of you have, but I'm sure some of you just haven't. You're just in work mode. You're doing this thing, and you do it every year. And so you never really took that step back and go, okay, let's plan this out of what we're doing and why. So, it's going to identify, your missions, goals, and objectives, what performance measures or outcomes, you want out of your program, and identify, even, most of you have programs now. Are you doing it at the optimal efficiency for both, your resources, but also your results? So taking a look at that, can you be better? Can you get better results? Be more efficient to get those results? It feeds into your marketing plan for your program. So once you establish through the plan, your target areas and what you want to accomplish and who those customers and targets are, that allows you to then develop the marketing plan on how you then reach those folks. And it's also just a good way to examine the needs of your region or your service area. What does the public need as far as information or guidance or some type of with transportation? And then we don't see this necessarily as a standalone plan. It's a good plan to feed into bigger regional plans. So if you've got constrained long plans or even your transit plans, local or regional transportation plans that are done, this is a good document to feed into those plans. So again, one of our goals is always to get transportation demand management type of things that we do into those bigger plans. So it's not just bike ped stuff and transit stuff or roads. You have these other things for demand management in there. Okay, next slide. And just a reminder, if you've got questions or comments, you'll see, we've got different sections of this webinar. Feel free to, put in your question at any time, and we'll pause to address them at a stopping point. So you don't have to wait till the end. Okay. So as I mentioned a little while ago, let's get to the due dates and things like that. So next slide. So it is a 5-year plan. So you're looking at a horizon of 5 years. So it's, it's the year that you're going to be planning for, and then for additional years after that. So our original schedule had due date of June 2022, and I think everyone's pretty much met that date, on giving DRPT what your schedule is, or what you think your schedule is, to develop the plan. And so that was just meant to get everyone's thinking about it, get everyone focused on it. If you have to, hire contractors or get some funding or things like that, that was a good way of setting things in motion, and coming up with that. We know that things will change with those, with those schedules, and that's fine. We just wanted to get everyone kind of geared up for it and thinking about it. And some of you are in, more advanced phase than others on doing these plans, and that's fine too. The due date, now this was one of the things we heard from folks when we put out the 2 drafts, that the original date, I think, was about 6 months sooner than what you see on the screen, of November 30th, 2024. That's the due date. That's when we would love everyone to send the DRPT their adopted plan, and we'll talk about how the plans need to be adopted later. But that's the due date, and that kind of puts us in line with the next cycle of applications and funding, for so that we can say, okay, it is in your plan, when you're applying for grants. But also, we hope it gives everyone enough time to get those plans in motion and get them done by November 2024. So if anyone feels like they can't meet that date, we will certainly discuss with you and figure out, what we can do. But I realize some folks need to get some funding, so that might take, and that's why we pushed it back further, because the grant cycles for, if you wanted a technical assistance grant to help with funding the plan, didn't line up with our original due date. And then what happens after you do this plan, right? This will be kind of really the first strategic plan that we've done. We've done probably 10 years ago now, some other plans, but those were kind of big, long-range plans that really had some difficulties with trying to figure out what's going to happen in 20 years. So we're kind of scaling it back to a shorter plan where the horizon is a little bit more manageable to think ahead. Obviously, a lot of the stuff with technology, some can pop up that we never thought of. That could change things. But anyway, the 5-year plan is what we're looking at. So what we want to do is we call it a new plan every 5 years, depending on the conditions. Not everything has to be new in there, but it's good to kind of take another look every 5 years to make sure you're doing the right things, getting the right results, and in 5 years, like I said, technology, travel conditions, employment conditions, a lot of things can change. So we want folks to really get a good update every 5 years. And then annually, we're also looking at getting some updates from you. And that's primarily if the conditions change. So, if nothing truly changed in your area, in your service area, like there is no new, major development or new, transportation service or facility, and nothing changed, we don't have a pandemic again, then you just need to send us an email or a letter, just stating, hey, none of the conditions change. We have no changes to this year to the CAP strategic plan. However, if something did change, how your organization is operated or running, some type of new transportation services or facilities, like, you get express lanes open up in your area, some type of major infrastructure thing happens, funding changes, you had funding at one point, that funding went away, or you have new funding, that you have for additional funding. Any significant development, whether it be residential, an employer, some, large, corporation drops down their headquarters with 25,000 new jobs come in your area, and that's opening up next year. You might want to change your plan to focus on that particular area, because it's a significant impact to the transportation system in there. Same thing for a residential, big huge apartment complex opens up, and that's going to change that area. Again, that's why we're calling this strategic. I'll use the term strategic and targeted almost interchangeably, because that's what we want to see. So that's why we look at these things when the update, like, did anything major happen? Doesn't have to cover the entire service area, but if it's significant enough and it's a small area, that probably is something you need to look at. And so that would then be a letter or an email just explaining what the change is and how that changes your operations. Are you adding services, changing the services, targeting different areas now that you were from the original plan? So that's what we want on an annual basis. And like I said, most years probably not much will change, but if something changes, you certainly want to plan for that and have a good plan of action for that. And that will also, again, feed into, if because of that change, you're going to then ask us for some additional money, or your application is going to look a little different because you're doing different things. It helps to have this annual update to kind of match that, and so we don't get surprised when we receive the application and go, wait, what are they doing? Why are they doing this now? We have a better understanding of what's going on. Okay, next. All right, so what do you got to put in the plan? Okay, next. So we broke it down into 5 chapters. Obviously you can do more than this, but this is kind of the minimum requirements that we really want to see in the plan. I mean, very similar to other plans that you have to do for DRPT, but probably some little differences also. But we broke it down into 8 chapters, and I'm not going to read like everything you have to do for each chapter, but I'll hit the highlights of each chapter so that you get an understanding of what goes into those. It may not be apparent, obviously, by the title. So next. So chapter 1 is the CAP overview. So giving us a little information of some background history of, when the program was established, why it was established, the governance of the program, like what agency, implements that, and how is that structure, within the agency, the organizational structure of the folks who work on this program, how is that structured, and then what's your service area, what's your scope of your region and area that you're going to serve, whether it be on the public resident side or the employer worker side. Okay, next. And chapter 2 is just give us some demographics about the service area, what characteristics. So what services are available in the area as far as transportation, facilities. I mentioned earlier, do you have express lanes? Those express lanes allow carpools and van pools with 3 or more people to ride free. Any other, what type of transit services you have? Do you have these TNCs, the transportation network services providers? Do you have a lot of park and ride lots? Just kind of give us some characteristics about what your area looks like in chapter 2. All right, next. So chapter 3 is when you start getting into the kind of the nitty gritty of the planning process. So this is where you want to have what's your vision, your mission, goals and objectives. What is it that you really want to do with this program? And so this is where you kind of come up with those things. Like I said, a lot of you have your programs that's been around for years and years and years. You just kind of do your thing. But this kind of like focuses on why are we doing this? What is our goal and objective? And then the things that you put in here, you've heard probably the term SMART. So they need to be, we want them to be strategic and not just kind of a broad brush kind of approach, but so we want them to be specific. We want them to be measurable, right? If you set a goal or an objective, how are you going to measure that? If it can't be measured, that's a good question of like, how you know it's going to be a success. So why do it? So it needs to be measurable. It needs to be attainable. I mean, it could be a little bit of a reach sometimes. That's okay to set a goal that's a little bit of a reach, but you want it to be realistic. And we can do this type of approach, not just, well, we hope to do this, but it may not be what we can do. So we want to make sure your goals and objectives are attainable, and then within the time period of the 5-year plan. So we don't want to put something out that may just be too far out in the future, or that you're not going to really attain in those 5 years. So that's kind of a small capsule of what we're looking at in this chapter. Okay, next. So chapter 4, so this is where you define, so you've got the service area earlier, but now you're looking at your service area and you're targeting the market. So again, this is where we get into the terms targeted and strategic. It's better not to have a broad brush stroke where we're just going to like do everything to everybody in the whole service area. You'll have service areas that are more densely for residential, more densely for employment, different types of employment. So this is the chapter where you kind of formulate that. What are the target markets? I know some folks have counties that are very large, and maybe year to year you can't spread your resources thin on the whole county, but you might have targeted areas that are going, well, this has just had some new development. We want to really target this area of the county because we had this new development and new people, and we want to get to them now while they are making their choices for transportation. What are the residents, employers, and workers that you're targeting? And again, I use work age residents because obviously you don't want to necessarily target children to carpool. So that's why I want to, this is where you kind of look at who your customers are going to be in the 5-year plan. And I think we had a question. Okay, so good question. How do we handle TMAs in your service area? That's a very good question. Yeah, so some of you may have, your organization is directly doing some of these things, but then you might have a TMA that also assists in the area. I think you're going to need to explain, how you set those boundaries up on who's doing what. The TMA probably is going to have to do their own plan if they're getting funding through DRPT anyway. And I'll talk about this later on in the guidance. I think that needs a little bit of coordination, so you're not, the TMA is not saying they're doing everything for your county all over. It's defined to the area, so it makes it a little more complicated in the plan. But I think there's a way to do that in the plan to say carve out this is the TMA's responsibility area, what they do, and this is what we do with the rest of the county. I think there's a way to do that, and we can further talk about that more when we get to towards the guidance section. Okay, next. All right, now this is your final, if you took a look at your service area, you took a look at your customers, you defined your goals and objectives. Now you're saying, okay, now what do we do? What's our plan? What services do we need to provide to these different customers? And it'll be different services based on who the customer is. What staffing that we need, and this is a good time to kind of review that staffing. It's not only the staffing, the number of people, but what are they doing? So you want the right people doing the right things for your program. So what is that optimal staffing level, and what types of staff or positions that we need? What technology that you need to get the job done? Those things change, but and it doesn't necessarily mean technology that you yourself are developing or buying. It could just be a technology that you borrow from some regional agency, even from DRPT. So it could be, it doesn't have to be something that you've contracted with directly or you've developed, but most likely there's some technology aspects for delivering some of these services that you need to explain. And then and partnerships, this is kind of related to that other question. So if you're partnering with a TMA or another organization, how are you doing that? How are you deciding who's doing what there, and how are that partner helping you in your goals and objectives? So that's where that comes in this chapter. All right, I see a hand raised. All right, I think that's Walter. So yeah, Walter, I'm gonna take you off mute. I think I could do that. Or maybe you have to take yourself off mute too. Oh, there you go, Walter.
Yeah, I think I'm off now.
Yeah,
you were answering the question regarding the TMAs in our areas. You know, like we have data, we also have Tyson's TMA. We have those that are involved, and they play a big part in the strategic plan. And basically, I just want to know how we're going to, as you say, coordinate those TMAs into this strategic plan when they have to have a strategic plan themselves. So should that be a strategic plan from Fairfax County, or is that strategic plan from the TMA? How we're going to coordinate that information into one?
Right. Yeah, I think with Tyson's, since their service area is entirely within the county borders, you could potentially incorporate their plan into your plan. Data is a different animal because they serve Loudoun County and Fairfax County, I think parts of Prince William also. So they will still need to do their own plan because of that. And so it gets a little tricky, and we will work with you on that because we don't have I can't show you the document and say, this is how you do it, right? So we haven't really done that before, but I think there's a way to kind of explain that without doing like a whole separate plan for the TMA. But I think just explaining that relationship and who does what, I think we can put that into the county's plan. And I think Walter, I think that probably needs some more one-on-one, conversations with us as we kind of work through it to figure out, is this the right approach or is that the right approach? Because I don't really have like an example to show you, but I'm thinking because of data and serving 3 different counties, they get a little more complicated, right? That's kind of how we how do we show that data is doing this part for the county. And so, but I think it's not impossible to do. I think we can certainly work with you on that. Okay, next slide, please. All right, chapter 6. This is the money chapter. What budget will you need to do the things that you say you're going to do? The staffing that you need. What budget do you need? And then identify reasonable funding sources. I think that's the key. So I wouldn't necessarily call this a, many of you heard of, constrained plans. It's constrained by the budget. In some ways, yes, this strategic plan is going to be constrained by the realistic expectations of the funding you can get and your funding sources. So you don't want to dream big on this and go, well, we hope to get, some new funding source coming in. I think you want to stick with what you know and what you can realistically count on. And if there are some things in here where, hey, we found a need that we need to do this for, but we may be short on budget, I think that's where you kind of identify that here, if there is any budget shortfall. But overall, the plan should be constrained by the realistic budget that you think you can get. Okay, next slide. All right, and then no plan is good unless you can figure out what do we do? I mean, how do we know that we're doing the, as we operate this program, how do we know that we're getting results and on the right path? And so we want to see in this chapter, what, and we have, DRPT has performance measures that you can just use, but you may have your own, agency performance measures that you want to come up with for your program. So what are those and why? And then what data is that you're going to collect to get all this stuff? What's the source of that data? And then how are you monitoring, your program, to make sure that it's doing what you want it to do, right? Getting the results you want. And again, this is all about results. So this part is really kind of, how are you doing some self-evaluation to make sure that what you're doing is getting the results that you expect, or getting high enough results that you think. And then, again, as you're monitoring that gives you some idea of, how well you're doing it, and if you need to change course. If something's not working, maybe you need to change course a little bit on what you're doing. So that's chapter 7. And then the final chapter, next slide, please, is this is where you explain. So I'll be talking about this, but the big thing here is that this plan we want it to be data driven. So we don't want it to be just, well, we've done these things, we're doing these things, so that's what we put in the plan. So we want to really take a look at the data and go, okay, collect the data, and then this chapter is really, how did you use that data to develop the plan? So it's not just, this is the data we collected, here you go. It's about, okay, we collected this data, and this is how we use that data to define our services in our plan. And so that's really what we want to see is in this chapter, is like, how did you use any of that research and data to guide the plan, to develop the plan, the services, the operational plan. Okay, next slide. All right, and earlier I mentioned plan, has to be an adopted plan submitted by November 30th, 2024. So this is what that means. Next slide. So as I mentioned earlier, we just don't want this to be just a plan that, okay, we did it because DRPG says we have to, and we'll just do it, and then here we'll just send it to them, and nobody really uses it or sees it. But we really want a plan to be part of your agency. I mean, this is what your agency is doing. If you're getting funding from an MPO or a TPO, this is good for them to see, like, this is what we're doing with your money. And so whoever governs your agency, governs your program, we need that board to formally adopt the plan, and say, yes, we approve of this plan, and that gets recorded. We will be looking for that. So again, we want to make sure that people that govern you and the people that are major funders to you know what you're doing and are backing it. I think this is a good thing if you have an MPO and TPO that funds even part of your program. Having them, accept the plan, I think is a good thing. Goes back to my earlier comment about, I've been at this for years. Some of you have been at this for many years, and what we do, TDM, commuter systems, hasn't always been like top of mind for a lot of these, organizations and transportation organizations or big regional planning organizations. And we want to get what we do as talked about as a road project. So to do that, we've got to get in front of these boards and make them be part of the process to embrace what we do and what you do and your programs. And when they do that, they're more likely to actually promote you and say good things about what you do. And when it comes time for funding, they're more likely to say yes if they know that they've backed a plan. So that's why we really want it adopted. It all depends on your program, what agencies is actually operating it, but certainly the operating agency needs to be that governing board, that top board needs to be. Now, not a county. So I don't necessarily mean if you're a county that you have to go all the way to your county board of supervisors. We'll probably need to talk about that. It would be good to present it to them. But I don't know that the county board of supervisors typically, adopts these types of plans. But again, if they're adopting other types of transportation plans, it may be where you need to kind of bring them to them. So, if you're unsure about what board needs to adopt your plan, we can talk about that as you go forward with your plan. And I see one more question. So, okay, so, hey, Joe. Yeah, I think if you're a planning district commission that operates it, even if you're partnering with other folks to operate your program, you're hired by that organization, right? You get a paycheck from that organization. That board would be the one that would be adopting the plan, right, Joe? Okay, next slide. All right, so I'm just going to give you a little bit of guidance on what our kind of vision of things, and maybe it can help you kind of as you move forward with it, keep things in mind to help you get what we feel like it should be in the plan or how you do it. So, all right, next slide. All right, so we talk about a blank slate approach, and so that's kind of a good approach, we think, to this process. I said this earlier, a lot of you have been doing this for years. Your programs have been around for years and years and years. I don't know how often or when the last time you actually took a step back and said, why are we doing what we're doing? Or why are we doing it this way? Is there a new way? So that kind of blank slate approach, is kind of a good way of kind of approaching this, right? Erase everything you've done or you're doing now, forget about that, try to put that aside and say, okay, if we didn't have a commuter systems program and we had to create one now, what would it look like? It's a fresh new start. So what would it look like? What would we need to do? And I think if you think about it in that terms, I think it'll help. A lot of times you do a plan on something that you've been, operating and this is what we've done, always do, kind of creeps in, and you don't even think twice about it because that's what you've always done. We want you to actually think twice about it. We want you to actually go, why are we doing that? And so, I think that's kind of our guidance there is to start off as kind of a blank slate. Let's just start fresh. What would you do? Pretend you're creating it from scratch. All right, next slide. All right, it's okay. I've gotten this question before. It's okay to bring in outside help, right? So a lot of you folks are planning organizations, so you've got some good basics and plannings and things. But even for you, you may not have the bandwidth right now to do a plan like this. So it is okay to bring in some outside contractor work to help you, do some things to help you, guide the plan or get some information and data for you. DRPT's contractors, we have a bench contractor that are on board. We have 5 of them. They all can help with these plans or do them. They can do everything or they can do a little bit. So you can use those folks too. And if you want to, we can certainly tell you who they are. They are on our website, but if you're interested in reaching out to them, we can give you their contact information. And then, you can always ask us for assistance. We definitely want to be part of this plan. Even if you're not getting a grant from DRPT directly to do the plan, we definitely want to be in there. When you have your project kickoff meeting, we would love to be part of that kickoff meeting, just to kind of make sure that, gives us peace of mind that things are getting off on the right foot, but also it's another opportunity to get some technical assistance from us. And as you go through the project, again, particularly if you're getting a grant from us, but even if you're not, we're here to kind of give you some technical assistance. We have this webinar. You're going to see this the final document that you've seen a couple of drafts of already. But there's a lot of details that come up that aren't fully explained in this document or even on the webinar. That's a perfect thing. Hey, reach out to us and go, hey, is this what you're talking about? And I'm thinking back to Walter's question about the TMA. I think that's going to involve a lot of kind of back and forth with us, with DRPT, to kind of make sure we're doing that right, so we all kind of understand it and support it. And then another thing, is the comparing. So it's okay to kind of look at not only like comparable programs in Virginia, but even outside of Virginia. Particularly those who are members of the Association for Commuter Transportation, reach out to some of these members in other states and see if you can find a program that's comparable to a region like yours, with the demographics and characteristics of yours, the size, and see what they do and see how they staff or budget things. That is perfectly fine. Again, if you don't have the time or the bandwidth within your agency staff to do that, it is perfectly fine to get a contractor, either hire one yourself or use one of DRPTs to help with that. So you want to make sure you're not skimping on the details and you're getting everything you need to build the best plan, right? Good planning leads to a good program. We want to make sure you're doing good planning, and we want to help you as much as possible. Okay, next slide. All right, data-driven. So this has got to be a data-driven process. It's not the other way around where we'll get data that feeds in our foregoing conclusions and fits in the box. We actually want to look at, and things have changed, right? We have this pandemic. That changed a lot of commuting patterns. It changed the time of day. A lot of people commute. It changed how often they commute. It changed other travel too, not just for commuting to and from work. And so I think it's a good idea to kind of take a look at that data and see what that data is telling you as far as what services you need and where you need to focus your services. So origin, destination, those may have changed. I think it's always good to look at not only the workers, the work age people who live in your service area and where they go to work, but also do you get people from outside of your service area, and where do they come from outside that work within your service area? And those are two different customers that probably need two different services. And again, when you're dealing with commuting, you want to make sure you're dealing with work age populations and not necessarily, hey, we do a big marketing campaign day like the whole world. It may be, that's why we say strategic and targeted. But checking out, the data and things that you thought you knew or you did know may be different now, and they may be different for the next several years. So we want to make sure that you're gathering that data and then using that data to guide your program, guide the services in the target areas. Okay, next slide. So we came up with just some, we've got questions about, well, what data should we use and where do we get the data? These are just some examples. There's probably others that are good sources that are not listed here. So this is not an all-inclusive list. Neither was that prior list of examples of the type of data. You need to get things that are going to really help you. So if it's not on the list, that don't say, oh, we don't have to do that or we don't want to do it. If it's going to help you, obviously get it. So, but VDOT has a lot of good data on commuting and traffic and delays and origin, destination. A lot of times they have that, but time of days. They've got data down to some of the roads on and when the peaks are on those roads for travel for every day of the week, including weekends. So VDOT's a great resource for traffic data, travel time delay data, that sort of thing. DMV or some other folks might be good for average auto occupancy, which might be a good data source to have to go, hey, if we have people in our service area, average household auto for a household's only one, or this area it's like 3, then there might be some different ways of reaching out to them, different services for them. But certainly the U.S. Census has a lot of commuting data. They do there's the big census data that's done every 10 years, but then annually they do the American Community Survey, and that drills down to different communities. Again, you want to use the data that's specific to your service area. You might not always get it that granular. You might have to take kind of the region which you're in, but at least that gives you something. But the American Community Survey data is really good. It breaks down a lot of the commute information, a lot of the demographics information that could be very helpful. On the map is a really good source also, because you can get data in a map form. So I'm a visual person. I love those things when you can show me what you're talking about, and on the map kind of will display a lot of that information for you. The Virginia Employment Commission has a lot of data on their site. I mentioned earlier about where people live and work. That's a good source. VEC is a very good source for that. ridership information from transit agencies or things like that. Van pool providers can maybe give you some data also. So again, not all inclusive, but those are just some sources that we know of that we have used in the past for various purposes that we can get good data from. But you might have some other sources, and that's fine to do also. All right, next slide. All right, so we budgeted an hour here. I wanted to make sure I got through my presentation to give folks plenty of time to ask some questions. We've already had a couple. So I'm done with the presentation. So I would just want to use this opportunity to ask for you folks to ask any questions that you have so that the whole group can hear. But obviously we can work one-on-one too later on. So, all right, I think Sarah, you have raised your hand. I'm gonna take you off of mute. Go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm with Loudoun County Transit and Commuter Services, and we've started our strategic plan update and we set up our scope of work. We have a contractor on board. We set it all up with the guidance document that was issued in January, I believe. Is this substantially different? What would you advise that we do as far as any changes to your new guidance from the old one?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that because we've gotten that question before. So the guidance has not changed substantially since even the first draft, but certainly not from the second draft. Basically, what we've done in what you'll see in the final is just a little more details because people question like, what does this mean? We got a few comments like that. So we tried a little bit more explanation, but the basics are the same. I think the biggest difference is I think the draft might show like the data as an appendice and not a chapter. The biggest change is that we made the data a chapter 8, and we made it so that part of that chapter is not just showing the data that you used and the sources, but explaining how you use that data to form the plan. That's the biggest change and the only real significant change that you'll have from the January one.
Okay, thank you. And then just I noticed one last question. I noticed that the submission deadline is now looks like it's extended a little bit, right? I'm interpreting that correctly. It's not shortened, it's actually extended.
We extended it at least 6 months, I think we did, yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay, so Karen, Taylor has asked some questions about funding and grants and stuff. So let me just tell you a little bit about what funding sources could be used for the plan. So DRPT has an annual technical assistance grant program, and that is certainly something plans are all plans, transportation plans of this type, transit plans and others are eligible for the technical assistance grant program. It is a 50-50 program, so there is 50% state funds and then 50% local funds. That is that, but you can also, we've been talking to VDOT. They will allow in some cases using some of the planning funds that they give to a region to also be used as match for the project, for the plan. If you get any planning funds through DRPT, like 5303 planning funds, those can certainly be used for it. And so the match is a little tricky. I think specific to your question, Karen, no, we don't do in-kind match, but we have some other options. I do believe some folks who get some of the planning funds, and those planning funds are typically matched, have a match both locally and from DRPT. I think we've worked out some ways where some of that can be used or as the match. So I think when you get into those complicated ones where it's not just you're going to get a technical assistance grant, you'll have the 50% match and you'll go from there. We'll work with you on potential match sources for you so that it's all done right, we're all on the same page. But yeah, in kind is not an option, unfortunately. Okay, Kelly Hitchcock.
Yeah, hey,
Go ahead.
just to clarify, I heard with the 5303. So if we, when we put in our 5303 for the PDC funds, if we wanted to use a portion of those allocated funds that would come directly from that, are we saying those 5303 funds can be used as a 50% match to the technical assistance? Or is it that 5303 you can execute the plan through your 5303? I'm just not sure the specifics on the use of the 5303.
Yes,
Sorry.
definitely the latter. So if you get 5303 funding, there's a UPWP that gets associated. You know, this is UPWP is the plan for the funding, and so it
Right.
will include all different plans, including transit development plans, have been funded out of 5303. So you can do it there and put it in as a project, and it's solely part of the 5303. That also includes not just the federal funding, but the state match and local match. You can do it there all in one. The other question was, can you use some of that 5303 as match for a technical assistance grant? And we are working on that. I think we're going to look at that kind of case by case, just to make sure that we're doing it right, because it does get tricky, because your 5303 is matched by the state. Typically, we don't allow state funds to match other state funds.
Right.
And so, but I think there's ways to work around that. I had been talking to some of our planning staff because they've gotten questions similar to that. And so there may be, I don't have a definitive answer for you, but that is something that kind of relates to what Karen was asking, that we may be able to get some of that to be a match, at least maybe the federal portion of it.
Okay, but definitely as we're developing our UPWP next year, we could just put developing a commuter assistance program within the 5303 work program, take it to the MPO, get the approval that way, and that, thank you.
You could certainly
Great.
do that. It is certainly the CAP strategic plan is an eligible 5303 funded plan. Yep. All right, we got another question. All right, more about 5303. Okay, yeah, so Kate Gibson from GWRC. Yeah, so there was some work being done in Northern Virginia with using the federal portion of the 5303 federal portion, not the state match, to be a match for the technical assistance grant. So it has been done, and so we will work with you guys who wants to do that on the details of that. There's a little trick to it, so it just has to be documented in a way, and then like invoices coming in so that you're not double billing the technical assistance and the 5303 necessarily. So, but yeah, so thanks for that, Kate. So, Kate's saying it's been done. So if we did it once, we can certainly duplicate that for others. Good questions. All right, anyone else got a question? I think Kelly and Walter, I think your hands are just up from the other questions. But if not.
That's correct, sorry about that.
Okay, all right. Hey, we've allocated till 2 at least. So if anyone, last call, I mean, don't be shy. I know you guys aren't shy, but, and then also I'll babble on while if you're thinking of a question, give you a minute or two to think of a question. But so we will definitely be following up with each one of you. Like I said earlier, we definitely, when you kick off your program or your project, we definitely want to have conversations with you about that. We want to understand, your approach and what have you. And then we want to be there, from time to time, have some discussions, some updates, give you an opportunity to ask us some more detailed question about, hey, we gathered this data, this is how we think we want to use it. Is that something you guys, like, or, even things like that. We are here to kind of answer those questions. So we definitely want to have some regular contact with you folks individually as you move your plans forward. And some of you have gotten some grants a while ago that we just stopped because of COVID. It just didn't make sense to do it. We will have to get back to those to talking to you folks about it. But anyway, I was giving you folks some time to think of questions. I don't see any new questions. I mean, shout out if you have any. But if there are no further questions, I'll give you 4 minutes back. And again, if you think of something, right after this or later, reach out to me or Gabe or Kathy. We'll be happy to get your questions answered. And then please, start reaching out to us about setting up some meetings, some sort of project kickoff meetings, so that we have those discussions early on. We don't want you to get into the middle of the plan and go, and then you tell us something. We go, well, that's not what we were envisioning by, what we said in the document. So we definitely want to have a lot of those conversations earlier on. And like I said, I will send out to everyone who registered the document, the final requirements and guidance document. Like I said, minor changes other than shifting the data into a chapter 8, where you have to also describe the usage of it. That's really everything else, just minor. Oh, last second question. Good. Yes, the presentation. So, Mary Olivia, is it somewhere here where they can download, or do we need to send that to them?
That is correct. It is under handouts, but we can also send it if someone forgets to download it.
Okay. So there you go. If you see, okay, Karen got it. Yeah, so there should be a handout section of the menu bar that's on the side. You can download it right from there. So we'll give you a few more seconds to do that. But if you don't get a chance to download it, just reach out to me. I'll be happy to send it to. We are recording this, so it will be on our YouTube channel, and we'll let you know when it's available. And with that, I think I don't see any more questions. So I think we can wrap up here. Again, thank you for joining us on this Thursday afternoon. Hope you got something out of this. And again, if you have some questions you think about later, please follow up with us. We want to stay in touch. So thanks again. Have a great afternoon.